"This isn't a museum, old man. Take that relic off." The voice hit hard, not because it was loud, but because no one disagreed. The man stood still. Gray jacket, worn cap, and a single military insignia sewn neatly onto his shoulder. Old thread, sun-faded, shaped like a shield with 3 stars. A symbol that once meant something. A young inspector stood in front of him, arms crossed, voice sharp. "You're not in uniform. You're not staff. This lot's for official use, not memory lane." Then, with a quick motion, he reached forward and ripped the patch off the man's jacket. The fabric gave way with a sound that didn't belong there. Not under a flag, not with people watching. Someone gasped, but no one spoke. The man didn't flinch. He just looked down at the torn threads. Then he took the insignia from the inspector's hand, calm, precise, and folded it once. He turned, walked back toward the exit booth. No words, no defense. Just the sound of shoes on concrete, and the kind of silence that makes everyone remember what they chose to forget. Before we continue, where are you watching from today? Your city? Your state? I read every one. It means more than you know. By 6:45 a.m., he was already there. Same steps, same jacket, same silence. But this time, silence didn't feel like peace. It felt like pressure. Walter unlocked the booth. The key stuck more than usual. Someone had jammed the slot with a candy wrapper. He said nothing, just pulled it free, turned the lock, and stepped inside. The patch was visible again, left shoulder, above the heart. It looked older now, or maybe the world around it had gotten sharper. The lot filled slower that morning. Some cars hesitated. Some drivers pulled in, stared, then parked farther from the booth than necessary. A few rolled their windows down halfway, eyes darting, cautious. No one asked him anything. No one said, "Good morning." The patch did all the talking, and everyone seemed to wish it wouldn't. By 7:15, a courthouse staffer approached with a clipboard. She stopped halfway, turned suddenly, and walked the other direction, pretending to take a call. Walter stood straighter, not proud, just grounded, like a flagpole that no one wanted to salute anymore. He took out the attendance sheet, still unofficial, still kept by hand, and began checking off deliveries, license plates, patrols. A shadow moved across the glass. Someone was standing just outside the booth, close, still. He turned. It was the inspector. No clipboard this time, no fake smile, just a look, flat, assessing, like a man checking an outdated ID. "You stitched it back." Walter didn't answer. "You understand? That can be interpreted as impersonation." Still no reply. "You don't wear history. You archive it." Walter's voice was calm, quieter than the hum of the overhead lights. "I didn't wear it for them. I wore it for who I buried." The inspector stepped back half a step. Maybe it was the tone. Maybe it was the weight of the word buried. Then, with a glance to the booth's corner, "There's no chair." "That's intentional." And he left. Walter didn't move. He stayed standing. At 8:12, a teenage intern from records passed by the booth, laughing into his phone. As he passed, he muttered loud enough to hear, "Still thinks it's his base." By 8:30, a woman in a gray suit knocked once on the booth's glass. Didn't wait. Just handed him an envelope through the slot and left. Inside, a typed notice. No signature. "Please be advised, personal displays of military affiliation by non-active personnel may cause confusion or disruption of courthouse operations. No, dear Mr. Harlan. No salutation." Just that. Walter folded the notice, slid it into his breast pocket, directly beneath the patch. He didn't take it off. Instead, he stepped outside, adjusted the crooked American flag at the entrance, the one no one else ever seemed to notice, and returned to the booth. By 9:00, the lot was nearly full, and so was the silence, the kind of silence that builds behind glass. The kind that fills a man's lungs when people decide he's been around too long. The kind that only breaks when something worse arrives. And Walter? He was still there, waiting. He came back the next morning with the patch stitched tighter, No welcome, no eye contact. The first staffer to walk past didn't say good morning. The second pretended not to hear when Walter asked if the delivery gate had been locked overnight. At 8:03 a.m., he caught a whisper through the booth glass. Why's he still here? By 8:20, it wasn't whispers anymore. Two inspectors stood on the other side of the lot, arms crossed, looking in his direction. One pointed. The other took a photo. He didn't react. He punched tickets, directed traffic, picked up a plastic bag left beside the curb. All with the same quiet pace he always had. But people noticed, and this time, they didn't pretend not to. A clerk in a tailored suit walked by and glanced at his shoulder. Didn't they tell you to take that off? Walter didn't answer, just kept organizing the permit slips. By 9:10, a woman from Internal Services entered the booth without knocking. She didn't sit, didn't smile. She placed a folded paper on the desk and tapped it twice. You're creating confusion. He looked at her, calm. Confusion about what? She paused. The question unsettled her more than anger would have. Your appearance suggests you're representing something you're not. That can lead to misinterpretation. Or escalation. Is that a warning? No, she said, voice low. It's a request, before it becomes one. Then she left. He unfolded the paper. Notice. Unauthorized display of government insignia may violate security protocols under subsection. He stopped reading. His eyes drifted to the patch. One thread had started to fray again, the very edge, barely visible. But he saw it. By noon, the lot was full. The courthouse buzzed. No one spoke to him directly. But they spoke. Near the vending machines. Did you hear what he did during the protest years ago? At the exit gate. Just a patch? Yeah, that's what they all say. By 3 p.m., someone had removed his folding chair from inside the booth. No explanation, no replacement. He stood the rest of the shift. Evening came, and with it, rain. It started light, just a whisper on the glass, but grew quickly into a drumming sheet across the lot. He had no umbrella. Still, he walked the rows, checking for blocked lanes, fixing tilted cones. One driver rolled down their window to say, "Shouldn't you be inside?" Walter simply looked at the puddles near the storm drain and said, "Not yet." He didn't clock out. He never did. He just stayed until the last car left. That night, back in his apartment, he unpinned the patch, not to remove it, but to tighten the stitching. Again and again, as if the thread could hold back everything pressing in. The TV stayed off. The room was silent. The only sound was the pull of the needle through fabric, slow, steady, almost ritual. Because he knew something now, they weren't going to take it off him again. They were going to erase him thread by thread until he erased himself. And that he would not allow. Friday morning came cold, with a sky like brushed steel. Walter arrived on time. He always did. But this time, the stairs arrived first. 3 security staff stood near the side entrance, one with a clipboard, another with a shoulder radio, and the third pretending to read a notice. Their voices were low, eyes cutting toward the booth. The booth was locked. No one had left the key. Walter didn't ask. He picked up a damp cloth from the trash bin and began wiping down the directional signs. Then the traffic cones, then the courthouse map, smeared from the rain the day before. A supervisor brushed past him, shoulder sharp. "We don't need martyrs in parking lots." Walter didn't flinch, didn't stop. At the security table inside, someone muttered, "He used to be someone. Now he's just trying to prove it." He heard that one, and kept sweeping. At 10:45, a delivery van blocked the emergency access lane. The driver, young and impatient, was arguing with a courthouse staffer in a bright vest. Walter approached, slow but steady. "No deliveries through this lane," he said calmly. "You'll have to move around back." The driver scowled. "And who are you?" Walter looked at him. "The one who's telling you before someone in uniform does." Something in his tone, not loud, not angry but precise, made the driver hesitate. "Then turn the wheel." Walter didn't watch him go. By noon, someone had taken the broom from the storage closet. He found another, older. The bristles were bent sideways, but he used it anyway. Every act was deliberate. Every task finished. Not for credit, not for redemption, because that's who he'd been before, and who he refused to stop being now. At 2 p.m., a woman in heels dropped her purse in the crosswalk. Coins spilled. Lipstick rolled under a parked sedan. She let out a frustrated breath and crouched awkwardly, trying to collect them. Walter didn't hesitate. He knelt slowly, one knee cracking with age, and helped her retrieve everything. Then stood and handed her the last item, a folded, worn receipt that had stuck to the sidewalk. She looked at him briefly. No thank you, just a nod, maybe out of obligation, maybe something more. At 3:17, the inspector returned, this time with company. They didn't approach him directly. Instead, they walked the perimeter, stopping now and then to jot notes or gesture. Once the inspector pointed toward Walter's shoulder, the patch, the old thread, still there, still holding. By 4 p.m., Walter was alone on the lot. Clouds had thickened overhead, a storm coming, not just in the air. He stepped back inside the booth which someone had quietly unlocked while he worked. No note, no explanation. The chair was gone again. He remained standing. His hands rested on the edge of the desk, fingers curled slightly, like a man who'd spent too many years giving orders he never raised his voice to deliver. He looked out at the empty space, the flag waving at half-staff, the far corner of the lot, where 3 kids had once saluted him without knowing why. And then he reached for the envelope he had placed days earlier, the one addressed to the presiding judge. It was still there, unopened, untouched, forgotten. He picked it up, folded it once, and placed it back in his pocket. Because if they wouldn't open it, someone else would. The following Monday, no one expected anything different. Walter arrived just after dawn. The booth was open this time, but stripped bare. No chair, no coffee mug, not even a pen, just a space. He placed the clipboard down anyway. The patch still rested on his shoulder, faded now, one corner lifting. A passing intern chuckled under his breath and said, "Still holding on to that?" Walter didn't respond. He hadn't come for a fight. He'd come because he still had somewhere to stand. By 8:45, traffic slowed. More people than usual. An unusual number of dark sedans circling the courthouse lot, unfamiliar uniforms, and a brief silence between honks and crosswalk clicks, like the city holding its breath. At 9:00 sharp, the gates opened wide. 2 black vehicles rolled in, followed by a military SUV with official plates. A U.S. Army flag fluttered against the wind from the rear antenna. People stopped, turned, and then a man stepped out. Stiff posture, deep lines around the eyes, uniform pressed so sharp it looked ceremonial. The silver eagle on his collar caught the sun. Colonel Dean R. Maddox, Retty. He walked across the parking lot without hesitation. Behind him, a younger officer followed, tall, clean-cut, holding a small object wrapped in cloth. They weren't there for a speech. They weren't headed for the courthouse steps. They were walking toward the booth, and toward the man standing beside it. Walter straightened his shoulders as they approached. The colonel stopped 2 feet from him. He didn't smile, didn't offer a handshake. Instead, he spoke with quiet clarity, the kind of voice you don't forget once you've heard it in combat. "Staff Sergeant Walter Harlan, 3rd Battalion, Honor Division. You trained me." A pause. Then, "I never forgot how you carried yourself." Behind him, the junior officer stepped forward and unwrapped the object, a military jacket, not new but pristine, fitted for Walter's frame. And on the left shoulder, an identical insignia. But this one was sealed in embroidery, threaded in gold, permanent. The colonel handed it to Walter in silence. Walter didn't reach for it immediately. Instead, he looked the colonel in the eyes and gave a single sharp nod, the kind that says, "I hear you," the kind that means "thank you for seeing me." Then he took the jacket. The colonel reached into his breast pocket and removed a small envelope. He offered it with both hands, not casual, not performative. Walter opened it. Inside, a single card. Military grade. No decoration. One word printed across the center, valid. Below it, in pen, some uniforms fade, some never stop fitting. You stood when standing wasn't popular. Walter didn't speak. He folded the card once, slipped it into his jacket pocket, the one where the memo had been. Then, slowly, he removed the worn jacket from his shoulders, the one with the torn patch and scarred fabric, and set it neatly on the edge of the booth desk. He put on the new one. The fit was exact. The silence around him was total. The inspector had come out from the courthouse. He froze at the edge of the lot, clipboard in hand, face unreadable. And then the colonel turned, not to him, but to the bystanders gathering near the sidewalk. "Some men retire," he said. "Some men remain." And then, without ceremony, he saluted. The younger officer did the same. And Walter, after a long breath, raised his hand to his temple and returned the gesture. Not for attention, not for approval, but because he still remembered what it meant. People around the lot began to stand. A few removed their hats. Some simply straightened, like the ground itself had remembered how to hold weight again. No one cheered, no one clapped, but the sound of reverence was louder than any applause could have been. That evening, Walter didn't go straight home. He walked 3 extra blocks, past the diner that used to give free coffee to veterans, past the faded mural of forgotten names on the wall of the city library, past the rusted bike rack where he'd once helped a kid reattach a broken chain. He stopped at a small brick building tucked between 2 office towers, a place few noticed anymore. On the inside wall of the entrance was a glass display case, empty for years. Once meant for community announcements, war medals, and local service honors, Walter stood before it. In his arms, the old jacket, the one with the torn patch, the uneven stitching, the scar of dismissal. He didn't hesitate. He folded it carefully, tighter than a flag, neater than laundry, then opened the display case with a key he hadn't used in a decade. He placed the jacket inside, centered it, pressed the glass shut. Then from his pocket he pulled out a small label, pre-written, pre-glued. He placed it just beneath the jacket's hem. 3 words printed in his handwriting, earned, torn, kept, no date, no explanation, just that. Outside, the wind picked up, the courthouse lot was empty again, and the sun was beginning to fall behind the skyline. The world moved on, fast, loud, full of names and noise. Walter crossed the street slowly. Same walk, same rhythm, but something had changed. At the far end of the lot, a teenage boy stood by a parking meter, backpack slung low. He watched Walter approach. "I saw what happened this morning," the boy said. "They saluted you." Walter nodded once. "I didn't do anything." The boy shrugged. "Sometimes just staying is something." Walter didn't smile, but his eyes softened. "Then I guess I stayed." He reached the booth, placed the new jacket on the hook, turned off the interior light, and stepped back outside as the final car rolled past. He looked toward the flag. It had caught the wind again, flaring just enough to show the stars. And then, without announcement, without audience, he raised his hand to his brow. Not because anyone was watching, not because it was required, but because, for a moment, it was quiet enough to feel like memory again. A memory that wouldn't be erased. If this story moved you, type "kept" in the comments. Your voice matters, and I read every single one. And if you haven't subscribed yet, here's your quiet reminder. Thank you for being here.